I think we're going to see a significant growth in SMRs. I think typically the forecast for the future had been that SMRs were going to happen, but they were going to happen in the next 15 or 20 years. Based on the news in the last couple of weeks, I think that SMR push is now going to be happening in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. And that's a significant difference, I believe, in terms of what's happening on the demand side of the uranium market. So the demand messages have been super positive.
Welcome to another edition of CEO and Market Expert Interviews. I'm your host, Lucian. Some of you know me as Triangle Investor from social medias. Today, I'm joined by Bannerman Energy Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Gavin Chamberlain. Gavin, I had Brandon a few times in my show, but you're for the first time here, so a warm welcome to you and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Lucan. It's great to be here and look forward to the interview.
Thanks. Let's start with the question that I usually ask all my uranium guests, and that is your view on the current uranium market and how do you see it going forward in 2025?
Lucan, great question. I mean, I think I met you for the first time at WNA in September, and in the weeks since then to now, the news on the market has been phenomenal. I mean, starting off, I think, with the Microsoft Constellation agreement. And what we've seen these big tech companies, AI-driven companies, actually getting involved with established utilities because they want nuclear power. They want clean power to be able to facilitate their own strategies around reducing carbon, etc. And we're now seeing a totally new player in the market who's always been on the periphery, but we've never really seen signed contracts. So we've had Microsoft, we've had Amazon, we've had Oracle, we've had Google, all in the last 4 to 6 weeks, all making statements on contracts signed with either utilities or even with new developers for SMRs. And I think that brings me to the second point. The SMRs has also always been around. People have been talking about it forever, but it's now starting to become real. We've seen, the number of companies that are dealing with SMRs is grown significantly. I think there's between 10 and 15 physically being constructed at the moment. So things are moving forward on the SMR front as well. And I think where that really helps us in terms of uranium is these are smaller units that can be manufactured quicker. Obviously, from a cost perspective, it makes a whole lot more sense for companies to be involved with a small modular reactor because they can actually establish it and get it up and running and commercially viable much quicker. So I think we're going to see a significant growth in SMRs. I think typically the forecast for the future had been that SMRs were going to happen, but they were going to happen in the next 15 or 20 years. Based on the news in the last couple of weeks, I think that SMR push is now going to be happening in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. And that's a significant difference, I believe, in terms of what's happening on the demand side of the uranium market. So the demand messages have been super positive. The US Department of Energy as well, with their support for various projects, is also adding huge impetus in the US. And then over and above that, in Europe, we've seen phenomenal turnaround in terms of countries now coming out and supporting nuclear. Yes, there's still a couple of outliers that aren't supporting nuclear, but overall, Europe, I believe, is putting together a paper that they're going to present on how nuclear is part of the way forward. So, we've seen international decisions being made at a country level. We've seen new influences at a tech and AI level. And then we've seen utilities themselves starting to develop. And on top of all of that, you've got the Chinese growth. And the Chinese growth has been real over the last 3 to 4 years. And I don't believe that that's going to change. And all of that demand requires uranium. I think
spot on.
So that's really, a really positive environment to be working in. And I mean, we are seeing a climb in the long-term pricing has climbed from $80 to $82. So we are starting to see the long-term effect of all this positive news starting to affect the actual market, the real end of the market that affects us in terms of when it comes to contracting.
Definitely, you and I spoke about spot price not reacting so much, but that day will come also. But what I want to hear is the long-term price and the long-term contracts. Actually, you are following that component probably much more than the spot. What's your take? What are you hearing and seeing about the long-term contracts?
Yeah, so at the moment we're seeing a differential in terms of the type of contracting that the utilities are looking for. So there's a lot more variety in terms of the contracts that we're looking at. Overall, we still don't believe utilities have understood that the bottom price needs to probably be above 80 before they're going to be able to secure contracts. But still, I mean, base escalated contracting, hybrid contracting, sort of a combination of a percentage of market related versus a percentage of fixed price. All of these sort of contractings are becoming, so it's very unusual for us to talk to a utility where we're only offering a single type of contract. Typically, we're offering a range of contracts that deal with different options. So we're finding utilities open to listening to different types of contracting. And over and above that, it's not just around the pricing. Is for a new entry into the supply market, what's also important for us is the flexibility and the notice period around the tonnages that we have to deliver into that contract. So when we're looking at our contracting, it's not just price that we're saying we're reticent to sign on at the moment. It's all of those factors taken into account. So the entire contract terms, hand in hand with the price, is actually how we're assessing discussions with utilities at the moment.
I understand that part. Your final investment decision has been delayed from 2024 Q3 to Q4 2025 because of the difference between contracting expectations versus what buyers are currently willing to agree. And I understand that you want to maximize value of shareholders, that you are not signing any cheap pound, so to say. But Gavin, what are the minimum conditions Bannerman is looking to sign a long-term agreement?
Yeah. So, Luca, that's a very good question because I think people's interpretation of our announcement has been linking it directly to the fact that we're not getting the contracting prices that we believe we require. But keeping in mind, those contracting prices are also linked back to our final financing decision. So the FID decision to delay is not just a price issue in terms of contracting price, but it's also linked back to what the final financing of the project looks like. Obviously, once again, as a junior miner with a single resource at the moment, is our cost of capital can be significantly high. And what we're doing at the moment is going through a financing process where we're trying to optimize that cost of capital to the lowest number. That cost of capital number then actually drives, at the end of the day, the acceptable lowest cost that we can accept within our contracting scenario. So the two are interlinked. So if you ask me the question, what is our lowest price? It's very difficult to give you a definitive answer. But what I could say to you is we would battle to sign any contracts, I think, below a floor of 80. And that may give you some direction. But at the same time, if we got a really good financing option on the table that reduced our cost of capital, potentially that's also negotiable.
Fair enough. You mentioned financing. I would like to hear more about it. What have you done so far in terms of financing, and what do you actually plan to do next?
Right. So we started a strategic financing process way back in November last year. It didn't do terribly much because at that point in time, we didn't have our mining license. So we got our mining license late in December last year, and that then added impetus in January of this year to the whole strategic funding process. And with the almost, I think, the steadying of the spot price market, what we've seen is a lot more genuine interest. So we've got over 6 parties in our data room at the moment looking at potential strategic funding options. Over and above that as well is we've also progressed our project or company debt these proposals. So we've also started a process where we're actually looking at options to provide debt into the project or the company. So we've got the strategic financing, we've got the debt. And then at the end of the day as well is if there's a gap, potentially, obviously, there's still room for equity to come into the mix. With the share price increase over the last couple of weeks as well is, we're starting to get back into an area where the share price now makes sense to actually get a bigger percentage potentially out of equity. So ultimately, what we have to do to get to FID is not just go to the board and say, here's a financing package, but we have to go to the board and say, here's a financing package. Here's the related contracts that we believe we need to sign. And on that basis, only would we get FID. But at the same time, we've always had a strategy of be prepared and be patient. So to a large extent, I've spoken about the be patient. So the be patient is around getting the right result for shareholders and for the company moving forward. The being prepared is around maintaining momentum such that we don't put the schedule at risk. And we've taken and when we talk about potential, where's Etango at the moment, I can talk to the be prepared portion in a lot more detail. But really what the financing and the contracting is all around being patient to find the right mix of solutions. And you can imagine, we're dealing with, at any given stage, 3 or 4 scenarios linked to finance and contracting.
Okay. Gavin, can you give me an update on Etango? What are you currently doing there and what are the next steps and their timelines?
Yeah, perfect. Really good, because this is the be prepared portion of our strategy. And really what it's around doing at the moment is maintaining momentum. So we've already placed and completed the initial contract for the road access. So we now have a road from the national road through to the boundary of the mining license. And we've also put in our construction water pipeline, which makes us independent of anybody else and allows us actually to do the earthworks in what is a very thirsty environment for earthworks. So we've got water storage on site with continuous supply from NamWater. So those 2 contracts were both finished by Namibian contractors, and I'd like to stress that because one of our strategies has been to reduce the size of our contracts so that we can allow Namibian contractors to participate and give direct feedback to and direct improvement to the communities that surround the area where we're building. So those first 2 contracts were completed on time and with no safety incidents. Since then, after we raised our 85 million Australian dollars recently, which was another really big success for us, has put us in a very positive cash position that is allowing us to move forward with additional contracts on site. So we've now placed the bulk earthworks contract on a Namibian contractor. We've placed the internal roads construction. Keeping in mind, the site is 6 kilometers long. So the internal roads are a significant part of what we have to build. So we've placed that contract, and we've placed the contract for the construction power, which we will require when we get to concrete work and structural steel work. So all of those contracts are currently running on site. So in effect, we're in construction. And over and above that, we've also placed the order on the HPGR, so the high pressure grinding rollers, which is the last stage of our grinding process. We've actually started the manufacture of the high HPGR at the moment. And one of our strategies to allow us to go through stage gate approvals is where we've engaged with contractors to get vendor drawings. We went through a tender process that basically had a 2-phase order placement strategy. So what we do is we place the initial order on the contractor or the supplier to get his vendor drawings. And then we have, as part of the tender negotiation, we actually agree the escalation formula up front. So it forms part of the contract. And then what we do is when we place the 2nd phase order, which is to commence with manufacture, we have no arguments and no debate around what the escalation is because we tendered it in the original contract. So we've done that for over 7 contracts, and we're currently busy with the next 13. So when we say stage gate approval for construction moving ahead, is I go back to the board probably every quarter, and I represent to them saying, right, these are the current contracts. These are the start dates that we require to maintain schedule. Can you approve additional funds? And this is what I'll deliver for those additional funds. So that's the basis of our stage gate approval. And what it's allowing us to do is maintain momentum. So we're quite proud of the fact the day after we were awarded our mining license, we placed our first contract on site and physically started with at least with the construction of the access road. And what we want to do is we want to continue with that momentum on site because it does lots of things for us. It keeps the government on side because they can see that we're developing our mine. It allows me to slowly but surely build up a really good construction team and not rush into it so that we're just taking people off the shelf because they're there, but actually finding people from our networks. And then over and above that, it's allowing the people that were already part of the company in Namibia to participate and see the growth of the project as we move forward. So that's really what's happening for us at the moment in Namibia. And we're very, very, very happy with the way things are going. The contractors are really coming to the party on the safety and on the environmental side. And we're seeing a culture that was already in place actually growing with the project, as opposed to very often when you look at a project and a mine, you have two distinct cultures that are different. And what we see in here is we get an integrated culture that we're all happy with, both from the project side and from the company side. So quite exciting in Namibia at the moment because the board has allowed me to actually continue with my momentum. And I think that's the key to our progress moving forward in Namibia, and on the pre-prepared side is maintaining that momentum.
So you have been busy, you are busy now, that is great to hear. But Gavin, how is the situation with workforce and skilled labor? Has the team on the ground who came from Rossing changed?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So the Rossing team really is our managing director, who was Werner Eerwald. He was the mining manager at Rossing, and he's the managing director of our Namibian company. So that hasn't changed at all. Mike Leach, who was our local chairman, he's still a local board member, but is no longer chairman. So he's still actively involved. And Mike Leach, as you will know, was the managing director of Rossing. So Werner and Mike are the link to Rossing. But what's more interesting is the link to Swakop Uranium, or HUSAP as it's commonly known. Is I myself was the managing director at HUSAP, and a lot of the team that worked with me on the EPCM side, because I was the project director from the EPCM side, I've managed to pull in a lot of those resources into our team as well. So not only do we have a Rossing flavor, but we also have a HUSAP flavor when it comes to building the project. So the commercial manager that worked for me on HUSAP has joined us as the commercial manager on this project. The civil supervisor who ran the initial earthworks phase at HUSAP is now running my initial earthworks phase at Etango. And, Tommy and I have worked together for over 30 years. Cindy, who's the commercial manager, and I have worked together for probably over 20 years. And then I've brought in a project director who I've put into the wood offices in Johannesburg to manage the wood delivery of the project. And Jeff him and I have worked together probably for the last 35 years in various roles. Sometimes I've reported to him, sometimes he's reported to me, but right now he's actually physically running our project for us out of the Johannesburg office, where he's hands-on managing the wood delivery to make sure that they also staying on schedule and the focus isn't just on site. So I think, the Rossing link and the HUSAP link are still very much part of what we're growing in Namibia.
Okay. Gavin, how is the situation with the cash balance of your company right now?
As we said at the moment, we got 97.2 million in the bank. And we've committed on the bulk earthworks and the contracts that I mentioned earlier. We've only committed just under 30 million of that money for the construction of these contracts. So that effectively gives us 67 million for runway to fund the period between now and when we get to FID. Let me be clear about FID as well. We've announced that we're not going to be pushed into a corner by doing FID by the end of the year. But that doesn't mean that FID is necessarily going to stretch all the way to mid-2025. We may find that we get the right scenarios fairly quickly and we get to an FID early 2025. So all we're saying is we're not going to be forced into a corner to make decisions based on an artificial line in the sand. We need to find the right business model before we actually get to FID.
Understood. Have you ever considered to take a portion of cash or even raising new funds to buy uranium on the spot market and locking in some material to assure delivery once production is in progress?
Well, let's put it this way. It has been discussed. We did see that another company did, well, another two companies that I'm aware of have done that. At this point in time, we don't believe that spending our money on buying pounds is a good business decision for us. We want to maintain our runway. We want to get to FID, and we want to continue with the momentum of the project on site. Once we've done all of that, maybe we reconsider. But right now, it's not in our ballpark at all to look at that.
You have a stake in Namibian heavy rare earth project. What is the situation with that project, and what are some plans for that?
Yeah, so we got a 42.1% stake in the holding company, which is Canadian-based. So we've really got a watching brief. We're not actively involved with the work that's going on, apart from getting monthly reports. But I can tell you that they are in the middle of their pre-feasibility study. I understand the pre-feasibility study will probably be completed early February next year. But, they're going through a pre-feas at the moment. They already have their mining license, and they're currently busy with the pre-feasibility study. We're comfortable with what we're seeing coming out of the reporting around the progress on the PFS. And apart from that, I can't really tell you too much more.
Okay. Gavin, I would like to discuss a little bit of M&A. We saw recent activities with M&A, however, that was in the United States more. Some investors are concerned about single asset risk that Bannerman maybe has. If your company starts with M&A activities, which jurisdiction, or better to say, what kind of projects would be attractive to you?
Yeah, so we definitely would be of interest to us. And to be honest, we've looked at a couple of options, both in Africa, in the US. We even looked at one in South America. I think with the focus on getting the first project at the moment, at a higher level, we're assessing potential options. But right now, I think we would want to stay within the domain that we really understand. So I don't think we'd necessarily want to go into in situ recovery, because it's not something that we currently have skills within the company for. And we would even think long and hard around maybe going into an underground mine, because the skills around underground mining versus the open cast mining that we're currently doing are significantly different, maybe not as different as in situ recovery. So I think we would tend to focus in on similar sort of projects, and I don't think we have any restriction around where we would do it.
Okay. Any plans for uplisting on major stock exchange, New York Stock Exchange, maybe?
Not at this point in time, no.
Okay. How is your share registry looking right now? Let's say, how much is it owned by the big boys, the funds, the institutions versus retail? If you have some approximate numbers.
Yeah, with the last fundraising, we really got some really good institutional investors in, and we are significantly sort of biased towards institutional at the moment. Retail is a smaller section of our shareholding right now.
Yeah. Okay. Final question, Gavin. News flow from the company. What and when can investors expect, let's say, in the next few months, in the terms of news flow?
So news flow, I think something which, right now we're fully permitted. So we recently got the renewal of our environmental permit for the entire project, which takes us into 2027, which is really good news for us. Not that we were concerned about it, because the government they said to us 3 months to get renewal of an environmental permit, and we actually got it in 2.5 months. So, they're sticking to their side of the bargain, and that's a big benefit of being in Namibia, I must be honest, is the working relationships are positive. So that's good. But in terms of news flow, we're having off-market discussions with utilities, 4 of the major American utilities. But we also have submitted a couple of RFPs. However, who knows? If something did come, maybe there would be an announcement around that. But, how long is a piece of string? Because we've put in what we need, and if the utilities aren't where we need it to be, then there's going to be no announcement. Apart from that we are moving ahead, as I said, with the financing. And once we get to a solution that makes sense to us, obviously there would be some form of announcement around financing. But whether that's in the next 3 or 6 months, it's hard for me to tell you right now. But those would be the biggest drivers. Obviously, we will continue to update our project progress reports, and we'll do that fairly regularly, just so people understand that when it comes to shovel ready, we actually pass shovel ready because we're already using the shovel. So we will continue to update people on that sort of progress. But otherwise, no real major announcements coming out. That's about it, I think.
You never know, of course. In the meantime, some big M&A could happen. Somebody could knock on your door and some interesting deal can be made. You never know, of course.
And I mean, at the end of the day, if an M&A did come knocking, it's our responsibility at the end of the day to find the best solution for the shareholders. And we would do whatever we needed to do in relation to any M&A that came our way. So, yeah, I wouldn't say we got a closed door, but we certainly would have to be assessing it from what's best for the shareholders and for the company in the long run.
Of course. That was Bannerman Energy CEO. Gavin, thank you for coming to my show. It was a great chat, and I wish you luck going forward.
Thank you, Luke, and I look forward to chatting to you, hopefully in the not too distant future, with some more good news.